Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me today on Carroll PMC's video interview series. I'm excited to have you with me today to discuss another's journey through medicine. With me again is my distinguished Sergeant at Arms, I apologize, Michael Henderson. Michael, good evening.
Good evening, President Zwijak. It's always a pleasure to be here and get into this amazing interview.
Right, and like always, I have a great guest for you all, Nathan Meyer. Nathan's a PA applicant who graduated with a bio major from Ohio State University and switched from pre-med to pre-PA his sophomore year. In this conversation, we speak about what fostered that decision for Nathan and the perils and certain details about applying to PA school, the importance of the outdoors and prioritizing wellness, and the great amount of comparisons and contrasting that's possible between PA and MD and making that decision. So let's jump right in and say hello to Nathan. Nathan Meyer, welcome to Carroll PMC's video interview series. It's great to have you here with us today.
It's great to be here, Andrew and Michael. Hey.
It's great to have you on, Nathan.
Oh, you cut me off? You cut me off on my first question? No, just kidding. When did you realize, Nathan, that you wanted to become a physician assistant?
So it was actually like pretty late in my college career. Not that late, I guess, but so I started off like a lot of people. I was pre-med for probably to my mid-junior years when I officially was like, I'm PA now instead. But I really started thinking about switching probably midway through my sophomore year. And really the switch came for me, really it was like this one night sophomore year I was studying for like 4 hours over chemistry. And I was thinking about how much work I had done to that point and how much work was ahead of me. I was like, wow, I have 6 more years of school, then I have 8 more years of residency. And I realized that there's only so much time in life that you get. There's only so much time when you're young. And I realized that I didn't want to spend that time studying the entire time and doing something that I didn't want to be fully loving to do. And so at that point, I started looking at other options. And it wasn't like I wanted to get out of medicine because I knew I still really enjoyed being in medicine. And as soon as you started looking around, PA comes out as like the alternative, I guess. It's a very popular thing now to switch out of. And yeah, so I got to that point, I read more about it, and then I got involved in climbing and being outside and doing that, and I realized I really had a strong passion for that. And those activities take a lot of time, and they're kind of a bit incompatible with med school, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I ended up being PA. And then I did a bunch of other stuff like EMT, which I think we're going to touch on later, but that kind of cemented that position. So, yeah.
This is all excellent foreshadowing because, yeah, we're going to touch on a lot of this stuff. Let's backtrack a little bit first, because you said that when you were deciding to go PA instead of MD, you knew medicine from the get-go. What experiences made you know that medicine was in your future?
So basically a bunch of experiences starting from like high school into college. I think like a lot of kids in high school, you get exposed to medicine one way or another. For me, it was my anatomy and physiology class, which was awesome. And I was like, this is the one subject I'm like, I want to actually study for outside of class. Like I never felt that way about calculus or something. So I was like, I can do this. And I had and I was like, yeah, I'll just do pre-med. That's what you do. And then I got to college and I went to Ohio State, which is a very, very big school. So I was on a health science scholars program. So I basically from the get-go was surrounded by other pre-meds in my dorm. Like my entire dorm floor of like 200 kids was pretty much exclusively pre-med, which is a good and a bad thing to be surrounded by all that for freshman year. But basically we all got to bounce ideas off each other and about why we were doing medicine. And a lot of the ideas of wanting to push myself academically, to give back to my community, and always keep learning, being a curious person. really kind of drove that forward. And then later on, volunteering at the hospital, doing research, and then working as an EMT, just really drove that home that this is what I can do, not only enjoy doing, but a big thing for me was doing something that I know I can do well. Like I feel like I can actually be a good medical practitioner, which is something that I think is important. Like I think designing like outdoor gear would be really cool as an engineer. I would be terrible at it. Like I would be awful. So I'm not going to do that, but I think I can be good at medicine. So.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that scholars program you were talking about? Was it like a guaranteed track into a medical school, or was it just a sort of a conglomerate of classes and programs to do to be a good pre-med?
Yeah, so Ohio State has this thing called their scholars program, and there's like 14 different ones ranging across a broad range of subjects. Like there's engineer scholars, like athletic, like health trained scholars. I was in health science scholars. So basically what it was is like a 2-year program where you do like a bunch of seminar classes that relate to health science careers. You also get a bunch of other perks, like you get priority class scheduling and stuff like that. And it's like a competitive application process, like when you apply to the university to get in. But the other benefit is you live with your health science scholars floor for only the first year, and then you split up. So it's a pretty cool program. You get exposed to a lot of different events, a lot of shadowing opportunities, just a lot of opportunities in terms of things that are all related to helping you with grad school. I mean, you get a lot of advisors from people that graduated from the program, like upperclassmen. They really give back and help out. The director of the health science scholars program, basically you had like every semester you met with her to discuss how your plan was going for your projected grad school. So it just really helped you out a lot. But it also locked you in with a bunch of other neurotic pre-meds and pre-PTs and pre-As. As I think a lot of people know, we can get a little high strung, especially freshman year when a lot of people are hitting the college wall for the first time. So good and bad.
Interesting. That's got to be quite an interesting dynamic, like you said. On the one hand, that's quite efficient and useful, especially in a university as large as Ohio State, to have sort of like a community and a set of programs and structure around being a successful pre-med. So having those resources optimized like that is probably good. And I'm sure the intentions were to have like a community that was quite collaborative, in which pre-meds built each other up so that everybody could be physicians and be happy. However, I know that's probably not the case. And so I don't want to harp on that too much. It is quite an interesting scenario. So it'd be interesting for you to discuss a little bit more on what those experiences were kind of like, but also just in general, what your time at Ohio State meant to you.
Yeah, in terms of the competitiveness, like I said, we were living together for freshman year. So for like the first semester, you know, like freshman year, like no one knows what the hell is going on. You're like all freaking out together and trying to figure out college. The competitiveness kind of starts in like a really subtle way where you come back after a chemistry exam, you guys are all like trying to gauge where everyone did and like figure out where you stand and what you're gonna, if you're actually good enough to go to grad school, and you're all freaking out together. But the interesting thing about Ohio State is like that community of like 200 is like such a tiny fraction of pre-meds. Like biology, which is like the most common pre-med major, which is what I was, is the biggest major by far at Ohio State. So I think my freshman class at OSU was around 9,000 kids. I believe there was probably at least 500 to 800, maybe 1,000 pre-meds like freshman year. So like that pool is so small of what it actually is. But in terms of like what Ohio State meant to me in terms of is actually really related to the amount of people that go there, which is a good thing and a bad thing in terms of what it is. But I think it actually gave me a big advantage because every day you get to talk to so many different people who have so many different ideas. about not only just like life and the big concepts like that, but the more nitty gritty details of being in medicine, being a pre-med, being a PA, and what that means to them, why they're doing it, how they're going about doing it. You just get to absorb a ton of ideas and meet a lot of different people. And that's the biggest thing that Ohio State gave me, and why I'm like looking back on it, even above having all the resources of a big school, getting the big research opportunities that I did. It was just getting to meet a lot of people and learn a lot about different perspectives on the world. And so, yeah, it means a lot to me. Love that place.
I understand you work as an EMT during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic as part of the clinical experience. What about that and other clinical and non-clinical experiences influenced your particular career direction?
Yeah, so I started working as EMT actually before I graduated from school. So I graduated from Ohio State a semester early in December 2019. Before then, I was just like working part-time as an EMT for like 8 hours a week or something. But then I was working full-time from December 2019 onward. So I was working full-time as an EMT when COVID happened. And it didn't really affect like my career trajectory so much, because at that point I was already set on PA. I already knew what I was doing. I was preparing to apply actually. I just started my application, writing my personal statement like 2 weeks before COVID hit, like beginning of March. But what it really did was cement that I had made the right choice in doing what I did. Columbus as a whole got hit pretty hard by COVID. And the service I was working with pretty much worked exclusively with nursing homes and rehab facilities, which, as we know, is the biggest population that got hit by COVID. So basically, there was a period from April to May where pretty much every day I was just taking COVID patients to the ER from nursing homes, wearing a giant respirator, doing all the whole COVID thing. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, because most of the people that we were taking were in one of two camps. One, they were getting wrecked by the virus. I mean, they couldn't breathe. They were, the odds of them surviving off that were low. Or two, they were actually healthy. They tested positive, but they had no symptoms, but they have to be taken to the ER anyways. And they hadn't seen their families for about 2 months. Both situations are immensely heartbreaking. And being able to be the person that helps them, even in a small way, even if it's just holding their hand in the back of the ambulance or chatting with them for the first time and having an actual conversation with them for the first time in maybe like a month, is huge. And it just made me want to keep doing that throughout my career. And PA gives me a really good chance to be involved more with patient care, which is one of the kind of actually a key difference between PA and MD, in my opinion. PAs get a little more focused on the patient care, patient interaction, which is what I really care about more than anything. So yeah, EMT was a super cementing, like, I want to do this. And not only that I want to do medicine, but that I don't want to just be an EMT, that I want to go up the ladder. Like, I wasn't content just knowing EMT stuff and being an EMT. Wanted to learn more and be able to do more and, in fact, have a bigger impact. So, I don't know, do you want to talk? I can talk more about EMT, or I can talk about other stuff earlier as well. But.
No, I think that was amazing, Ethan. I was just, something that popped in my head was, do you feel that those experiences that kind of built that cement or built that foundation is something you'll continue to carry into the PA school? And you kind of touched on it a little bit. I guess like keeping those patients in mind and really honing in that patient care aspect and connecting with them.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially because when you start PA school, same thing with med school. I mean, the first year, or in med school's case, 2 years, it's totally didactic. I mean, I'm going to be completely removed from patient care by the time I start doing rotations by about 2.5 years, since I've done patient care, since I'm not working as an EMT currently. And it is important because you don't want to lose focus on why you're doing it. You don't want to just focus on the learning and the science. And while the science is what makes the patient care, it's not, at least for me, why I'm doing it. And what really matters. I mean, patients don't want to be treated like your test tubes, like your subjects. They want to be treated like people. So you have to keep that in mind. You do. And it's going to be tough sometimes when I'm in the middle of my like 4th exam in 1 week. But I think that's what will pull me through the grind, is getting to that point again, finally getting into rotations after a didactic year, and finally getting to interact with patients again. So I'm really excited about.
So before you get to do all that fun stuff, you got to first apply to PA school. And the medical school application process is quite grueling. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the PA application process, and what do PA schools consider as clinical and non-clinical experience?
Yeah, so PA school applications are also quite grinding. A little bit different in the way, I would say a little bit less grinding in some ways than med school. We don't have the MCAT. At least for now, the PA CAT's becoming a thing. I didn't have to deal with that though, so thankful for that. But the whole entire application process beyond that is very similar. I mean, you have a personal statement to write. Most schools have supplemental apps. You still have to fill out all your references, get your reference letters. You have to write down all your activities that you did. And the main thing that really separates MD med school from PA school is the hours, like you were mentioned, the patient care hours. And that's where things get really tricky, and why you really have to be selective about where you apply and really read schools' websites really carefully. So there's 2 main types of hours that PA schools generally want to see. They either want to see healthcare experience hours and paid direct patient care hours. And usually it's the second one that's the most important and is the one that gets people. So like HC, healthcare experience, can be anything from like serving food to patients at hospitals, or like for me, I did research, I did heart research, and I was able to count that because it was, I counted as health related. But PCE, paid patient care experience, and usually they want that to be paid, they won't take volunteer hours generally. Has to be something more like EMT, CNA. Some schools will take scribing, that's a very gray area. Phlebotomy usually counts. And the thing with all of those, and why PA can be kind of difficult for people, is that almost all of those require a certification. And usually that cert takes at least a month to 6 months to get. And so the problem is it's really hard for most people to apply to PA school while they're still in school. Or in a way where they graduate from undergrad and then immediately go into PA school, which a lot of med students just do. Like, that's pretty common. PA, it's not really a thing because it's hard to get that cert, work enough hours, and then apply also at the same time. Because you're trying to go straight from undergrad to PA, you have to apply your junior year, just like med school. Most people can't do that. So it's a different process. Yeah, I don't know if you have any more specific questions on that.
I definitely do, regarding the PA CAT, because I've heard from other PAs, and we've had other PAs on this video interview series say that they just didn't have to deal with it, not even know that it, or at least not really speak about it at all. And you sort of alluded to it being something that it's kind of a situational dependent thing. And so could you elaborate more about what the PA CAT is and what the requirements are around it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be honest, I'm not like a super expert on it, because so on my application cycle, there were only 2 schools out of, I think there's almost like 200 PA schools now, that actually required it on the application. And only 1 school that I applied to even like recommended it. I applied to that school without it, and I still got an interview and accepted at that school. So it's not really a thing. So basically, a lot of PA schools now, for their standardized tests, use the GRE. The GRE is a pretty pointless test for PAs, and actually in general, in my opinion. So I'm really happy that PA CAT's actually going to be a thing. So basically what the PA CAT is the PA school equivalent of the MCAT. At least that's what it's drawn up to be. It has most of the same sections, I believe. there is less of a focus on like high level OChem and physics, I believe, because both of those aren't really required for PA school. It still has the cognitive part of it and all that stuff. I think it's going to continue to grow and gain acceptance. It's definitely not a widespread thing required by schools yet. In 5 years, probably, which again, I think is a great thing. I mean, it makes the application process even harder, which sucks, but it's a way better judge of if someone has the academic knowledge and ability to process and take tests like that than the GRE. Half the schools don't even require the GRE. It's just kind of, that's the other thing with PA schools, like the requirements to apply are like very different by school. It's not standardized at all. But yeah, the PA Cats, it'll be interesting to see what happens with it.
Oh, that's very interesting. So now currently you're in Helena, Montana. What brought you here? And what has the Treasure State, I guess, taught you about yourself that you'll bring with you to PA school?
Yeah, so like I said before, I graduated in December. And then, so I was always planning on starting PA school this coming August. So I had about a year after my lease ran out in July in Columbus to kind of free go around, do whatever I wanted. So I was always planning on moving out west. I love the mountains. I love being outside. I love climbing. And originally, me and another buddy who I lived with back then, we're all going to move out to Salt Lake or Denver together. He's also a pre-PA, but he's working as a med lab scientist for a year before he applies. But then COVID happened in March, and none of the hospitals out there were hiring med lab techs. So he couldn't get a job. So I was pretty much in limbo up until May, early June. And then a friend of mine, Terry, who I hadn't seen for about 3 months due to COVID, she had moved back home to Cleveland, came and visited the house. And I had just gotten off work as an EMT, so I was done with like a 13-hour shift. I come home at like 9 o'clock at night. She's there with some friends hanging out. And she's like, Nate, I just got a job in Helena. Finally, I got a job. And I'm like, that's great, Harry. And she asked me, she's like, I kind of need like a roommate. I don't really want to live out there by myself. And I'm like, really? That sounds great. Montana? Yeah, I'm in. Let's do that. So basically in the span of like an hour, we kind of made plans to maybe do it. And then like 3 weeks later, kind of just made it official. And yeah, moved out in the beginning of July and been loving it. It's been great. No regrets. Montana is awesome. And the thing I think it's given me is that kind of like EMT reinforcing that I chose the right path in medicine. Being out here in Montana has really reinforced that I made the right choice to focus on stuff outside of medicine as well, like keeping that balance in my life and not devoting myself fully to medicine, because I can't imagine giving up going backpacking every weekend or climbing or doing all of that and devoting the same amount of time to that. So that joy of being out there really is what Montana has given me, I think.
That's well said. I think a lot of pre-meds echo that same statement as well. Do you agree, Michael?
I think it is very true that finding that balance is a constant struggle, whether that be PA, MD, DO, or any profession. I think it was just beautifully said, Nathan. I was shaking my head profoundly because I really enjoyed that you tied back the experience in Montana, solidifying your endeavors for the outdoors. And yeah, I'm really stoked that has been a part of your life.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So considering years of education relative to PA school, becoming a medical doctor seems much more difficult and labor intensive. I've heard countless PAs or prospective PAs like yourself say that becoming and being a PA is more conducive to students with families or children or who seek an avenue into medicine that is easier than becoming a doctor. Based on what you know, do you see validity in any of what I just said? Why or why not?
So there's definitely some validity to that. I mean, the facts are there. Like PA schools, 2 years, no residency generally. Fellowships are starting to become like a thing, but not very much. Med schools at least 4 years plus at least 3 years of residency. Generally, people are going to do it longer than that. So in terms of a time frame before you actually start working an actual real job, like fully to your capacity, yeah, PA is way shorter. Counterpoint to that, in terms of actually getting into each school, about the same difficulty-wise, if you look at the percentages. So don't switch from pre-med to pre-PA if you think getting into school is going to be easier. It's not. It actually might be harder for you depending on your situation, depending on where like your GPA is versus how many hours you get, what plan of like how many hours it would take you to be competitive in the PA field, or vice versa, how much research you would have to do as a pre-PA to go to med school, all that kind of stuff. In terms of after you're done, as a PA, if it's easier, if you have a better work-life balance, that's the term that gets thrown around all the time. The benefit of PA mainly, in my opinion, is that you get done faster. You don't spend as much time accruing debt, because even after you're done with med school, generally you're not making enough in residency to make an equivalent amount on that debt payment. So really you're ending up much more in debt. And so you're really kind of working under that bubble for a while. But as a PA, you kind of get to start working and doing stuff right off the bat. There's also the benefit of, as a PA, you're not taking on as much liability. So generally, our job is very much like 9 to 5, or if you're working like 312s and that's it. Usually doctors work outside of that. Or if they have their own private practice, they have to deal with all that stuff of actually running a business, which takes up a lot more time. So generally, and then this is broad, this can really depend. A PA could work more than an MD could work more than a PA. It depends what your priorities are. But generally speaking, it seems to me from talking to lots of MDs and lots of PAs that PAs have a little bit easier time of balancing the two. But I do think in the end, it's really about where your priorities lie. Like if you graduate med school and you're like, I can work part-time at an ER and make enough money for myself, and you could do that and have a bunch of time off. You do the same thing as a PA. It just really depends on your priorities.
Speaking of priorities in regards to specializing as a PA, being that PAs are trained as generalists first with the option to specialize later, they tend to have, or at least I've heard, they tend to have more lateral mobility in the sense that they can change specializations without needing extensive additional training later on. Do you feel this lateral mobility exists, and what are the pros and cons of it?
Yeah, so definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing to do. However, you can question how many PAs actually take advantage of it throughout their career. A decent amount who I've talked to said they maybe switched one time. Most people kind of find a thing that they like and kind of stick with it. But it definitely exists, and I think it's actually a huge benefit. It's actually one of the main reasons I switched. I have some large standing issues with the match system in residency. I think it locks people into something that they might not fully understand what they're locking into. And I think people change throughout life. People change what they're interested in. And it also, once you're locked into something, I feel, and having no opportunity to switch, it kind of locks you into that one thing, and that kind of leads to burnout more, in my opinion, because you can't switch and find something new. With PAs being able to switch, it's really easy to, if you get bored, to just try something new completely. And you can learn about many different facets of medicine that way. You're not locked into something. It's also nice because you can switch how much stress your job is giving you. Like let's say you're a PA and you're working a very stressful, at like a level 1 trauma center ER in a big city, and you're working like 60-hour weeks. It is so easy as a PA to be like, wow, I am really stressed. I'm really burnt out. and switched to working 30 hours at a family practice in like a small town. Like it's really easy to regulate your stress levels, whereas a doctor, you're very much locked in. If you're an emergency physician, you are locked in. And it lets you learn about a lot of different stuff in medicine. Lets you get involved in a lot of different things, which I think is really cool. So.
Interesting. Michael, you have anything to add to that?
You know, this is great because I think we're diving into topics that I haven't asked Nathan yet. And so he's putting them in a way that are hard to debate the benefits of being a PA. And I think it's something, it's a path that people should consider and weigh out those variables of what their priorities are. And as Nathan's story has outlined in great detail, I think it's a unique path that you're still being able to contribute to the medical community, and you're still able to really dive in and not only provide the best patient care, but do it at a high level because you're able to manage your own stress levels.
So Nathan, I
would like to interject. Like
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. I would like to interject. Like, I'm not trying to like bash like pre-med or like being an MD. I would like to like clarify that it is like a totally awesome path, and I have like crazy respect for people that do it. Because it's hard. It is grueling, and I have the utmost for people to do it. So I don't want to come off like I'm like putting down MD as professional. People should totally do it.
Yeah.
Like, not everyone should not drop what they're doing to become a PA. That's not what I'm saying.
No, but I think it's a.
We'd have a lot of unhappy PAs.
Yeah, that's true. I think in my shadowing experiences and talking with PAs, I think it is a path that can be overlooked though sometimes, and I think your story adds validity to that, in that it can be one of the many paths to be considered. So. Yeah.
Maybe the next question, Nathan, will sort of decrease the sentiment that you think everybody should switch over to PA. So why should someone not become a PA? You know, I'm a Carroll pre-med. I'm sold. PA sounds great.
Okay, great. All right. So there actually are like a few very valid reasons. So one is if you have any interest in research or teaching after you become a doctor or do anything. PAs can teach and can do research, but it's a much rarer thing. I mean, usually if you're teaching at a PA school, and PAs don't really do research. It's not really a thing. So if you know that you have an interest in research and might want to branch into that later on in your career, or you might want to teach later on, don't do PA. That's not what this career is about for you. So definitely go MD if that's what if you're interested in. And kind of building off that, if what really draws you to medicine is the science and the physiology and that harder, deeper understanding of what's going on in the human body, and you're always curious about learning more, MD. The harsh reality is PA school is shorter for a reason. We have one less year of didactic learning. We have one less year of rotations. We don't have a residency. We are not doing a huge deep dive into one specialty in a residency. If you want to know all there is to know about cardiology, or you really want to do surgery and you just want to devote your life to surgery, go MD. PAs can do surgery, but it's more like a first assist kind of level. So you're not going to be the master surgeon just for everyone bows down to you in the OR. It's not going to be what it is as a PA. So if you want that, then you're going to want to go MD. And then kind of a third point. Well, actually, there's two more points I have. One is money, which, as we all know here, period about don't go to medicine for money, and that still remains true. But money still matters. And if you're concerned about making the most money out of medicine, go MD. PAs start making more money earlier, but in the long run, MDs are always going to out earn on average. It's just the way it is. I mean, there's a lack of like once you graduate PA school, you'll get a raise to a certain point, but then you kind of plateau. MDs will keep going up pretty much. And you have a lot more ways as an MD to continue making more money. You become a head of a hospital administration. You can do a lot of other things that give you extra cash, and you just get paid more as a whole. And the final reason not to do PA, and this one's kind of a more of a self-reflective kind of question you have to ask yourself is, what's your ego? Because as a PA, you aren't the top dog. You are not the boss. You will never be the boss. You will always have a position above you. And as much as people like to say that wouldn't bother them for their whole career, when you're 50 and you've been doing the job for 25 years and that hotshot MD who's 30 comes in and starts ordering you around, are you going to be okay with that? And it's okay if you're not. Like that's nothing against you. That's not like a bad character trait. We need those people in this world who are like, I'm going to be the boss, I'm going to be the leader, and I'm going to tell people what to do. You know, that's why you need that in the workplace. But if you're that kind of person, you're always going to feel unsatisfied as a PA. You're going to be the person that works as a PA for 5 years and then goes back to med school, which is totally a thing, but why waste that 5 years and then that extra like 4 years, because there's no bridge program right now to MD. Like you're going to have to go through the entirety of med school and the entirety of residency to get to where you want to be. So yeah, really, that one's more like you really got to sit down and think about how you've worked in jobs before and what you aspire to be. And either way is totally fine, but you got to know that about yourself.
All those are really, really, really good points to consider, because regardless of what decision you're making, whether you go MD, PA, or even NP, or whatever you want to do, you really got to consider a lot of aspects about who you are, who you want to be, prior to actually making the decision, prior to pulling the trigger on any one of those career paths. I think that's a similarity across any of the any of the health professions that continue with professional education beyond undergraduate and that are quite extensive, that people make careers out of. That's pretty important. That reflection is quite important. And another thing that I think is very important, either directly or indirectly, in many people's paths on towards becoming a doctor, becoming a physician assistant, is the role of family, for better or for worse. And so what does family mean to you? And why is family important to remember despite the immense amount of responsibilities and stress a PA applicant, student, and professional juggles?
Yeah, it's a tough question, especially one for me right now, considering my family is about 3,000 miles away in Ohio. But I mean, they mean a lot. I mean, and not so much in terms of me. None of my family is like in medicine or anything like that, so it's not like I'm tied to it that way. But for me, medicine and family has been tied closer to the hip. I mean, my dad passed away when I was pretty young in 2007, which really kind of led me towards medicine in a way. I always wanted to be like, what can I do in the future to help people not be like that, not experience what I felt as a kid. And it's important to be there for your family. I mean, already my mom's asked me, hey, can you be my PA when I'm 65? And I'm like, no, Mom, that's not how consent, like, I can't do that. There's patient issues with that, I'm pretty sure legally. But it means everything, you know? Family is who's always there for you, you know? I mean, they're the ones who, when you just failed your chemistry exam your freshman year and you're in there crying because your GPA is at like a 3.1, you're like, I'm never getting into any grad school ever. I'm an utter failure. You know, they're the ones that are like, hey man, you got this. You can keep going forward. And if they're the ones that are there for you then, they're going to be the ones that are there for you when you're 35 and your patient just passed away, or you feel like you failed your patient, just like you failed that chemistry exam, except this time it's even worse because it's someone's life. and they're going to be the ones that are there picking you up. So you never forget your family, ever. As long as they were nice to you. If they were like mean to you when you were a kid, then you can forget about that. But if they were nice to you, yeah.
Well, I mean, regardless, they're our foundation, at least the way I see it. I mean, honestly, we're not going to have, not everybody's going to have a completely solid foundation. And solid foundation does not mean that there has to be medicine tied to family. I don't have, there's not a CC of medicine in my family, except I think a third cousin is a nurse or something like that. But
Yeah.
it is a great immense amount of support, at least the way I see it. Family is always there for really an immense amount of support. And your family, you beat me 3,000 miles away. My family is only about 1,500 or so back in Illinois. So you beat me. That's quite, yeah. But I resonate with that. It's quite a similar feeling, at least on my end as well. What do you think, Michael?
You know,
You haven't seen your family in a while.
I haven't, and I think for me personally, I don't want to shift the interview to myself. So I'll just really briefly, say, for me, moving to Montana, I think, was to build my own character and because I felt I had a solid foundation, but I didn't know who I was without that foundation, like without some separation. So I think it's something you can rely on, and it's there for you. And I also think for me personally, it is important to allow for growth by trusting that foundation and by exploring this path as an individual on the pre-medical way.
Yeah, you learn a lot after being independent, I feel like. And regardless, I think what our families all tie us back to is a point in time in which there wasn't medicine in our lives. Medicine wasn't the first thing that you think of in the morning that raises your heart rate about 40 beats per minute. And then the last thing at night that you're thinking about that's preventing you from sleeping because you're stressing and worrying about that. It brings you back to a time where there wasn't medicine. And at Carroll PMC, we think it's pertinent to prioritize wellness across everybody. We're not just pre-med robots. We need to have lives outside of medicine as well. So Nathan, I'm curious, who are you outside of medicine? And in answering this question, please describe your background in climbing and what the outdoors and Michael in the outdoors has taught you.
Yeah, so outside of medicine, I'm generally spending most of my time messing around in the woods or on on frozen waterfalls with Michael, at least a lot for this winter. So I guess that kind of sums that up is like when I moved to Montana, I actually just stopped working as an EMT because I got into school. So I now work at the base camp in town. So if you guys ever want to come say hi, I'm at the base camp. I'll be in the back of the ski shop. Michael bothers me a good bit over there. But yeah, I just love being out in the mountains, man. It's great. I mean, not even so much just climbing or just backpacking. I'll do it all. Like if you want to be like, yeah, let's go on a river trip, I'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's float for 5 days down the salmon or something. That sounds awesome. And so much of that it's in some ways I love it because it's a break from medicine. It's a place to de-stress. But in some ways it's really tied to medicine because a lot of the stuff I do in the outdoors isn't just really relaxing. A lot of people would call it type 2 fun. I generally enjoy doing the stuff that's pretty hard, like hiking 2 hours to go climb this waterfall that's frozen and it's like 5 degrees outside. You woke up in Helena at 4 a.m. You just drove 2.5 hours to Bozeman. You're going to go climb this, and then you're going to drive 2.5 hours back. And you're just like, at a certain point, you're like, why am I doing this? And the answer is always because one, it's kind of fun. In the end, it's kind of fun. And two, because you get to push yourself mentally, which you love doing it. If you're a pre-med, you probably like pushing yourself mentally, or a PPA, you like doing it. You like challenging yourself mentally. And two, you get to push yourself physically, which I always loved. I was an athlete throughout my entire life. Again, to combine those two aspects of challenging yourself mentally and physically is something that you can't really beat in the outdoors. And I think climbing is also the perfect representation of that. Yeah. If you want to know more about all that, you can just, yeah, like I said, come visit me at the base camp. I'll be there.
Yeah, I liken a lot of what you said to running as well, and I am not going to get into running because I could speak about it as well. I'm sure you can speak about ice climbing forever, but I could speak about running as well. But I've had a lot of experiences as well, coincidentally with Michael as well. It's crazy how he seems to find his way into both of our lives, into the sports that we are really passionate about as well. But aside from that fact, yeah, it's you learn. I find that I learn the most when I'm outside of my comfort zone as opposed to inside of it. And that's been learned through some extremely arduous challenges. And I think that can resonate too to some of the challenges that that you face that aren't so much as physical, although sometimes it can be, but also mental and emotional and even spiritual too. I mean, when you are having some experiences as an EMT that I'm sure you've had, and you're alongside people who are dying or who are in the process of dying, and you're with them in those moments and you see what happens to them and also people around them. I mean, that impacts you on a level that's not measurable. Like there's no metric to measure that. There's no athletic watch to measure that aspect. And so I think that the outdoors are, for me at least, it's the great equalizer in terms of how that goes. And since we're kind of going around the circle, Michael, what do the outdoors mean to you?
Yeah, honestly, I am immensely grateful for the outdoors. Some of my fondest memories, but more importantly, the strongest bonds and friendships that, I find family in the outdoors, in that the people I connect with, and, I can't believe just me going to base camp, not knowing anything about avalanche gear one time, asking Nathan, and then being like, hey, what do you recommend? And he's like, oh yeah, you should get this if you're going to the Tetons. And then it turned into, hey, before I leave, do you climb? To now, I'm always amazed by how the outdoors bring people together. And honestly, I think it connects with medicine too. I think with the outdoors, there's that element of, through these troubling or difficult cases or patients or deaths, there's this bond that's built. And something that I am really building now, I think, is these difficult challenges you face in the outdoors. Something I connect with is, once you've overcome one big obstacle, if another obstacle arises again, in your mind that you can do it because you've done harder before. And I think it's true in life and in medicine. So I'm just thankful for the both of you and many more people that have been in my life and continue to be a part of my life.
Very well said. I agree.
I agree as well. Very well said. Everybody who's watching this, go hike Mount Helena tomorrow. Just go hike.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Around Mount Ascension tomorrow at about 6 a.m. So run into me.
Right on, right on. So to not keep you too long, because as we are recording this, it is almost 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Let's wrap things up with a question we typically ask here. So as the Carroll PMC pre-med is listening to this, struggling on their path, possibly considering becoming a PA as opposed to becoming an MD, what final words of wisdom do you have for them?
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to what you talked about like 5 minutes or so ago about emphasizing wellness. the biggest thing that I want to tell every single pre-med and pre-anything that goes to grad school is relax, like chill out, take it easy on yourself, guys. Everyone stop. Like everyone's so hard on themselves nowadays. Like, oh, like take a deep breath, like chill out a little bit. You don't need to spend 5 hours on Reddit comparing yourself to all these other pre-PAs and pre-MDs or on Student Doctor Network or whatever, or like going around your classmates asking them all about their stats and what they're doing to get into grad school. Like you don't need to spend every waking moment thinking about medicine. Like go be a kid. You're in college. Go have fun. You know what? And fun doesn't mean like going out having party. I mean, if you want to do that, great, go party. Because you can do that when you're a pre-med, you can. You just have to make time for yourself. And oftentimes, instead of studying that extra 2 hours, you'll probably do better in that exam if you go out and take a walk or something. After you've already been studying for 4 hours, another 2 hours is probably not going to actually help you that much. You better do something else that actually helps you physically and mentally just chill, get better sleep. And that's really hard to do. Like, I know this is not like an easy thing to do because as pre-med, pre-PA people, we're generally all pretty high strung, pretty high achieving. We want to do more. But there's limited returns. And I mean, there's a reason why you hear about so much burnout in health professions, because people just keep trying to do more and they don't relax. They don't take the time to figure out what makes them not just like this all the time. And so find that. Take the time now before you really get into med school, because it's not getting easier in med school. Like it's not like it's going to get easier in PA school. It's going to actually crank up the difficulty. So you better figure out now how you can relax and be happy with what you're doing right now. So chill.
And with that, we end another episode of Carroll PMC's video interview series and wrap up another story for you guys. I really enjoyed the conversation with Nathan today. We touched on so many elements directly related to being a doctor as well as a physician assistant. I think there's a lot of crossover in both careers by virtue of an interest in medicine spawns both. And as we spoke about with family, amongst other things, your foundation truly impacts who you will eventually become. I also really liked our conversation about chilling out and being calm. I think it's something that, while Carroll, I'm certain, can't be considered the most competitive and most competitive pre-med environment relative to many of the bigger universities, especially Nathan's university as well. There's some gunners here. And there's people that want other people to fail, or that criticize people too, for absolutely no reason. And this fosters a lot of animosity, in addition to a lot of competition and a lot of stress. And this process really, it's a beautiful process in that while you don't really define exactly who you are throughout the 4 years of being a pre-med and undergraduate, I don't know, I feel as if you at least define who you aren't, and that's a beautiful thing. And so I really like the way Nathan spoke about that during today's interview.
Yeah, and also to add to that, I really connected, as I hope you as well, listeners are, with Nathan's connection to providing patient care. And that started through his own clinical experience, being an EMT, especially during the height of the pandemic. I thought that was a beautiful story he shared with us, and something that will serve him well as he continues with his didactic training and further on being APA. And in addition to that, I think the duality of balancing the medical career and climbing and the outdoors is something that can be paralleled to endeavors Andrew and I take on, and I'm sure and I hope other pre-medical students listening to this do as well, because I think it's important to have those outlets, as we emphasized in this talk. And I think it's something that I value.
Thank you for taking the time to listen and or watch us today. Hopefully this helped you guys gain some motivation or insight into what it takes to become a successful pre-medical or pre-PA student. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact your Carroll PMC officers, schedule an office hours slot with myself on Moodle, or consult with Carroll faculty of your choosing. Michael, do you have a quote to wrap us up?
I do. Saying no to something is saying yes to more life-giving opportunities.
Yeah. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next